there's been a sort of a leveling up for a while called the hiatus. So there's a whole group called the hiatus group that they are focusing on the leveling and saying, no, nothing is happening because it's leveled off. But the satellite data sets suggest that there is a significant increase over there. And so, for instance, in the future data sets that I'm using, there are 4 different scenarios, and the 4 different scenarios vary. They vary. First scenario is, what if we stop emitting CO2 today? What is going to happen to the temperature? So that is the first scenario. Second scenario is, okay, we are producing a little and adding some mitigation methods. Okay. Third scenario is, okay, we still produce, but we are still a bit careful about it. So it's kind of different levels. And then the fourth scenario is like, we don't care about it. We just continue producing in mass. So there are different scenarios. We call them the scenarios of climate scenarios. I'm always careful when I'm answering these questions because different areas are experiencing it in different ways. But then it is clear from the data and from what we observe around us that we are having some significant changes, and we have to find a way to deal with it.
Welcome to the Green Living Chats, brought to you by EcoAmid Solutions Ghana. I'm your host, David. Today's episode is part 3 of our 3-part series with Dr. Daniel Fiifi Hagan. In part 1 and 2, we did establish the importance of remote sensing, which has been used to make predictions in air temperature changes as well as soil moisture. These episodes are already available on all podcast platforms. You could check it out before getting into this episode. In today's episode, we are talking about how to reduce this high level of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. What are policymakers doing? And what advice can experts using remote sensing give to us? Here we go. If we continue the way we are behaving right now, industries, individual, developing countries, developed countries, and all the classes, what are the predictions and what should we expect when it comes to increasing temperatures and global warming? And earlier you talked about soil moisture affecting agriculture and all that. What should we expect if we continue at this pace?
Yeah, so I'll probably give you a little highlight from my current research because I'm working with the IPCC data set and the projections into the future. And so one of the things that I found was that in the milder scenarios where we don't continue to pollute so much, we have what we call, I'm calling this carbon sinks. So CO2 sinks. A sink means that that it's being sucked from the atmosphere, maybe into the ocean or into the land. And so we have the sinks increasing. The area of sinks are increasing in those milder scenarios. And then the area of the source, so it's either a sink or a source. So the area of the sources are reducing in the milder scenarios, and the sinks are increasing. So which means that we will have the reduction there, and which means that the temperatures would also sort of level or something like that. Of course, it will take a long time. We need probably more than 100 years to do that. And then in the extreme scenarios, the sinks are of course reducing. So we have less and less sinks. The ocean is the biggest sink. The ocean takes in the greatest amount of CO2. So I observed over the ocean that the areas where it were sinks, are going to become sources. So of course, this is definitely something that we don't want.
Yes.
So if we continue like that, sink areas are going to turn into source areas.
Okay.
And if sink areas are turning into source areas, it's not just temperature that will be impacted. Vegetation is going to be impacted, which will impact food production. And we would have to resort to what we call geoengineering, which is kind of the last resort,
Yeah.
the last resort thing. So geoengineering means that we are deliberately changing the climate, artificially changing the climate, and there have been experiments to show that it actually works. There's been natural and artificial experiments.
Mm-hmm.
In 1992, there was a significant uh, volcanic eruption in the Philippines, and they realized that because the eruption was very strong, it went into the stratosphere, the sort of the second layer of the atmosphere, and in the stratosphere, molecules would move slower, slower because it's cold over there, and they found out that because the the volcanic eruption went into that level, it blocked a radiation, both incoming and outgoing, and so it reduced temperatures, global temperatures. So there've been discussions of, okay, why don't we just shoot aerosols into the to reduce the temperature? And this may be something that we will resort to if we continue to go that way. We have to resort to this kind of geoengineering. And this is actually a project that Jason Blackstock, the one I
Mm-hmm.
spoke about,
Yeah.
he was on that project, and building the machine to do that. And we definitely don't want to get in,
Mm-hmm.
and the UN doesn't want to start even discussing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
geoengineering. But it's something we would definitely have to start discussing um, if we don't take care. Yeah.
I have just two last questions, and one is about data. But before we get into data, I'm sure that I don't know if this is within your field, but I would just like to get your perception about this. Definitely, you have an idea of what is causing the increase in temperatures and all that. So if we decide to go by this predictions and we want to reduce the our production of and release of CO2, what are some of the options that we will have to, look into instead of the things that are rather we are doing that are causing the increase?
Okay. So what do we have to do to reduce the CO2?
Yes,
Is
exactly.
that it?
Exactly. When it comes
Um,
to temperature.
yeah. So I think that it's definitely not easy to communicate with people these ideas, because for me, uh, I don't pay so much attention on temperature and the evolution of temperature. I pay attention to, say, soil moisture. Okay, well, I pay attention to land surface temperature, but not air temperature. They're actually a little different. So land surface temperature changes faster than the air temperature. Um, and of course, it is the land surface temperature that will warm up the air temperature. So
Exactly.
I'm looking at the fundamental level. But I think that, yeah, this is definitely a problem, and we have the scenarios to show how this is going to look like if we don't listen. There are, as far as I knew, at least in what I've been learning, there are about three ways that solutions that were given. One is called mitigation, um, one is called adaptation, and one is called, of course, the geoengineering that I was speaking about.
The last choice.
And so, yeah, the last. And so with the mitigation, it's more of we are putting in extreme measures to stop these things. And what he also ought to say that it's not just CO2 that is a problem. Methane is also a problem, and there are many others that are problems. But of course, CO2 is the one that most people are more familiar with.
Yes.
Um, but this mitigation is what we want to achieve, the mitigational methods. But I remember I asked a question. When was it? I think it was it was it wasn't too long ago. I think somewhere in 2017 we had this conference, the same conference. So there's a series of conference that discusses this, and my school usually is part of the organizers because my school is one of the leaders in the field. And so I remember that I asked the question. I asked the big guys that in 2000, or when I started attending these conferences, we were talking more about mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks as if our language has changed from mitigation to adaptation.
Mm.
And it seems that it's too late in some areas
They
to
already gave up
mitigate.
on it.
It's not just giving up, but we can't. We've already crossed the line, so we can't get into mitigation. And then so now we are talking more about adaptation. Adaptation would include sort of green buildings, um, and leading and finding a way to manage our wastes uh, here and there. And so we are sort of adapting. Okay, so this is what's happening. We are trying to adapt to it and find different ways of sort of keeping it under control in the middle ground over there. Um, and my results are telling me that even with adaptation, some places will still experience some rather extreme conditions. And adaptation is expensive. It is very expensive. Of course, mitigation is the most expensive because with mitigation you run at a severe loss. You know, if all countries were to shut down their major industries, well, then we have to stop flights and shipping and all that, and definitely it's a big loss. So adaptation seems to be the option in some areas. That okay, if you know that you don't need to fly, don't fly. You know, if you can have the conference online, do the conference online. Um, if you don't need to print out the paper or print out the book, don't do it. If you can afford an iPad which will host say I don't know 1,000 papers or something, or you get a Kindle that will host 1,000 papers. Yeah, do that and don't. Uh, Everyone has a role, and I think the problem is the education of the public. Um, this has to be very very intense, and we don't do that very well. At least no one really spoke to me about it when I was growing up, and I think that it's something that I would want to communicate to. Um, I'll prefer primary school, high school level, kids. Um, Let them know about these things, and not to scare them, but to say that you can do something about it. This is what you can do, and governments to listen,
Yes.
which is the most difficult part, because every government wants to develop, but finding greener ways of developing is definitely an option, and people are doing a lot of things. Um, like I said, I'm the one who is trying to look at the fundamental ways
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
doing with this,
It's right.
and hopefully people will see my paper and say, okay, we have to do something about it.
Exactly.
But for instance, what China is doing with Alibaba, with Alipay, for instance, is a very good thing. Planting trees,
Planting
people are,
trees. Yeah.
this is a very good project that
Yeah.
I think the world needs to learn.
I'm actually
And
working on my first tree.
oh wow, wonderful. So yeah, I think this is something that the world should definitely learn, and do something about it. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So, what do you think is the future for remote sensing? And I want you to chip in a little bit of those who are lacking remote sensing, as in, the stations. I mean, we talk about back home, those who don't have idea of what it is and who don't
Yeah.
see the importance. What's the future of remote sensing?
Yeah. Um, well, there are more satellites being launched. That's the thing. I think I just saw a news that Nanjing University launched its own satellite,
Oh, great.
which is pretty big. I know my school is also working on something like that. Um, uh, Ghana launched a satellite. Was it last year? Somewhere last
We
year. Or,
made it.
yeah, we made it. I've been looking for the specs on that satellite. I haven't found the documents on it yet. I really hope I get
Okay.
to find it. Um, because I'll be very happy to use satellite images to work over Ghana as well. Um, but I think that what people don't realize is that the data sets are actually very, very much available. Um, it's just so unfortunate that it's not used so much in application, but it's used more in research. But application there's a lot of ways to use them in application. And I am actually working with the Ghana Meteorological Agency to make use of this technology. And so one of the things I am personally doing is that I'm producing the data sets and trying to send the data across. And I always try to put them on public platforms where you can just click and download and use. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to do more. In light of that, for instance, I'm currently working with the National Center for Atmospheric Research in the US, where we are using we're using satellites and models and computer models. We are sort of combining them because they both have merits. So we are combining their merit, their strengths, and using superior data sets for people to use. And this data will be given freely online, just like that. So I hope that people use it. We would try to push the message across, and of course, I'm also in the process of trying to inform people, to educate people. And for me, I'm actually paying more attention to high school students. So one of the things that I started doing even before I came to China was to start this education group where I go with a group of guys from the university, and we go into high schools and we tell them about some of these things. It's something that I really hope to continue. My dream is that I will get a group of top scientists, take them to Ghana or any other place. High school kids will get to interact with these scientists and talk with people who are doing high level work and get inspired. People should get out of the idea of I want to be a medical doctor or lawyer. Like it's just the same monotony that we have over there. Sort of get out of that culture of monotony and explore more, that they can also do more. And I actually had a very, very wonderful privilege of talking with NASA about this. And NASA was telling me that they have a program like that they actually, they were encouraging me to sort of put my ideas in that program as well and use it. They even gave me some stickers to take to to Ghanaian schools and to give it out, and just to get them to know that they can also do something on these things. So I think that there is a lot of room. I'm trying to do my best to inform people. When I produce the data, I send links to people. I say, hey, there's data here. Use them. You can really use them, and to teach people how to use this data set. And of course, I hope that we have more brilliant minds tackling these fundamental problems of the assumptions that we are making. There's one assumption that I've been thinking about for about 2 years, and I'm working on. Hopefully, I would deal with that assumption. I'm actually working on it with Thomas, and we hope to deal with the assumption. It's one of the most difficult assumptions in the retrieval models, but definitely if we can make it, it will be of an immense improvement there. So yeah, I'm grateful to China for the chance to use their technology. They have a lot of technology that we can use, and so hopefully we have more land surface temperature data sets. Because it seems a lot, but it's actually not a lot. We need more and more and more, and hopefully we can produce that. Yeah.
Daniel, this has been super, super, super interesting, and I have really, really learned a lot. I don't know if you have any last words or anything that I didn't catch and you would want to put it out.
I do. We are in a world of AI, so now AI has also become a big part of it. Using AI to develop remote sensing data sets, and I also encourage people to get into it. This is something that I'm doing myself. Also to use AI to produce better prediction models. I started a group called Data Africa when I do my PhD, and the goal is to produce high quality data sets for Africa. And Data Africa is really a big dream of mine. currently we have about 11 countries in Data Africa who have provided data sets. They've provided data sets from their countries, and working with Ghana Met as well, and hoping that we come up with this really high quality data sets. And I invite people who have interest in this, especially Africans as well, who have interest in this, both Africans and non-Africans. We're really, really happy to have you on board. But I really hope that Data Africa will go very far. It's a lot of work, and I don't have much time to do that, and it's I wish I could have a lot of people working with me on that, because it's a lot of work. Like you mentioned, I'm processing a lot of data sets. I'm currently processing maybe about 30 terabytes of data sets.
Wow.
Which is actually very small. I've had to reduce it because the computer storage is not enough. We only have about 200 terabytes, and I need at least 500 terabytes.
Wow.
To do my work. And so, but over here, if people can develop ways of sort of reducing data sets without really compromising the quality,
Yes.
this is a technology that we need as well. And I always talk with the computer engineering guys and computer science guys in my school that, you have a role here. This is what you can do, and get them to be excited about it as well. So I really invite stakeholders, people who want to work, especially with the Data Africa project. Hopefully by the end of next year, we should have our first product ready. I have already finished one product, but we haven't launched it yet. But hopefully by next year, the end of next year, we should have some products, some data sets coming up that Africans can use to do high quality data set analysis over Africa as well. Because I didn't say this, but unfortunately, there's a lot of missing data in Africa.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest challenges. It's
Thank
one of the
you.
biggest challenges.
Thank
There's
you
a
for
lot
pointing
of
that out.
missing data, like really a huge gap, a very huge gap. And remote sensing technology is one of the best ways for tackling this. The good news is that most of the satellites out there are global coverage. So they cover Africa, which means that we can harness these data sets to improve the readings over Africa. And the Sahel is so important. The Sahel, the Sahara Desert, the Congo Basin, the Horn of the Horn of the Horn of Africa, the parts around Ethiopia, is also a very important part. And Southern Africa, which has a very dry region over there, is also so prominent. So Africa has these important dynamics. Unfortunately, we don't have the ground data sets, to do that. But the remote sensing technology is a very, very good way to tackle these problems. And I'm sure you know Dr. Isaac Nuni.
Yeah.
Dr. Isaac Nuni is someone his whole thesis was over Africa, and we were looking at water stress over Africa. So we did water stress over Africa. We looked at droughts over Africa, and we are going into droughts and floods and heat waves. So these are studies that we're actually doing over Africa that we are finding some very remarkable things. And one of the next things we're going to do is to look at the different water basins of Africa. How much water have we lost in the last 30 years? And if it continues in this trend, what is going to be the impact on food production and drinking water and aquatic life? This is a problem that we'll be tackling within the next 2 to 5 years. And I invite stakeholders to come and do collaborations with us. I love collaborations. I really like collaborations. So I'm happy to talk with people about it. Yeah, so I guess this is what I will say to end it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us today on the Green Living Chats. We wish you the best, and we hope that a lot of stakeholders are going to join you to collaborate, and we hope that you can have more data to support the nation, the continent, and the world as well. Thank you so much.
And David, I want to say I appreciate what you're doing. definitely a very good thing, and
Thank
keep
you.
doing what you're doing. And whichever way that I can help, I'm very happy to help you as well. So thank you so much for doing this, and I hope somehow we can push these communications into the
Definitely.
younger generations and get them to start thinking about these problems even before they get to the university. I
Yes.
think it would be very
Yes.
good.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so much
much.
for doing this.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
So, thank you for sticking around with us on this episode. Remote sensing has clearly showed us the impact of human activities on the environment. What can you do differently today to help us reduce the CO2 emissions in the atmosphere? We all have the right to be informed and educated on what is going on around us. Know what your government, policymakers, and industries are doing. We'd like to hear from you. Visit our website and social media platforms and drop in a comment. You could also contribute to our MEC blogs, a platform where we are giving all the public the opportunity to share their thoughts on environmental issues around them. Our next episode is coming your way this and every Sunday on all podcast platforms. See you on the next episode. Until then, live green.